The studs on our new house all have this stamp on them. They're Douglas fir, they're kiln dried, heat treated, they are graded and certified as number 2s, and they were made by Douglas County Forest Products, which is only like 6 miles down the road from where I live. And today we get to have a tour of the mill to see how studs are made. And we have a really special tour guide. It's someone I've known my entire life. Here's a picture of us when we were small. I can really vouch for him. This is John Blodgett. He comes from a long line of Sawyers, at least back to his great-grandpa, Sam Ball, who is also my great-grandpa. And you might have seen him in one of our really old videos we did that was also about sawmilling. So let's go check this out.
The original Douglas County Forest Products was started in the 1940s, about 25 miles from here. And the original company was called Douglas County Lumber. And it was kind of like the old school version of a logging camp where everybody lived on site. There was a camp cook, like the historical image that people have of logging. Eventually the company relocated to the town that we're in now, into Roseburg, and the mill has been at this location since 1956. We manufacture studs, so 2x4s and 2x6s, in 8, 9, and 10 foot length, and all of those products are kiln dried to 19%.
Studs are made here from ponderosa pine, lodgepole pine, hemlock, white fir, and Doug fir. There's almost constantly log trucks pulling in, unloading, and selling their logs to the mill. The price that the mill pays for the logs is contracted beforehand between the mill and the log seller, but the volume and quality are calculated once they're on site, and that's done by a third party to determine the net dollars that are due to the seller. This third party is known as a log scaler.
We measure the logs, and that measurement is called scaling. It's called log scaling, and we're determining the volume, the grade, and the defect within the log. At our facility, we measure and grade every single log that comes in to ensure that we're getting the best quality, the correct lengths, and that the seller is being paid for exactly what they sent.
So basically every log is sort of appraised?
Correct, yeah. So we unroll the load, lay it out, it's called angulating it, and we have 2 company tapers that are going to come by with a log tape, one on each end, the smart end and the dumb end. The smart end is the guy reading the tape, and he paints on the log the length of the log. And then the third party scaler, a company that we contract to measure the volume and assess the defect, he's going to measure what they call the scaling diameter, which is the small end, and then he's going to eyeball the log and say, oh, it looks good, or there's an issue with it, like maybe there's bugs in it, maybe it's cracked, maybe like here's a good example. Like, I don't know what happened to this tree, but there's the butt down there, here's the top, and there's this big kind of like a knot, almost like a burl on it. So that's defect in the log, and he's going to deduct the sawable volume from that log based on that defect.
Logs are stacked into decks. This here is a deck, and John said there's roughly 100 loads of logs or so per deck, and the decks are organized by species. So for example, these 2 decks are all western hemlock, and these decks over here are Doug fir.
Each species of wood requires a different drying schedule, which is why we sort the species by the log truck. Doug fir dries the quickest, and ponderosa dries the slowest.
We could do an entire video just on the equipment you see running around the mill here, but just to touch it briefly, this machine here is referred to as a Wagner, and there's lots of different models, but they're all absolutely massive. This one here weighs 150,000 pounds, and it can lift over 100,000 pounds. It's as big as a house. These are log loaders. They sort logs more one at a time, and they're also used to stack logs on top of the deck, thereby creating what's called a high deck. So you can store more logs on one deck. The only downside is you have to then take the deck apart with a log loader also. Okay, now let's go look at the mill And the first thing to mention is that sawmilling creates a lot of mess. If you have ever worked with wood or firewood, you know this. You get bark, you get sawdust, all types of other dusts and just fibers that really pile and add up.
So in the log yard, the bark is coming off, and seasonally the bark comes off the log much easier than other times. So when the sap is running through the tree in the spring, and when that happens, like you can take like a rock and throw it at a tree, or just maybe like a hammer or something and tap it, and the bark will just slough off. So during that time, there's a lot of bark that's falling off. We scoop it all up and we run it through our cogeneration facility, which is this large block over there. So it's a boiler with a generator and a turbine, and it produces the electricity for the entire facility as well.
So you burn it.
So we burn it.
Not only is the sawdust and bark creating the electricity that runs the mill, it's also creating the steam that heats the kiln to dry the lumber. And I don't know why, but this whole system completely blew my mind and sort of made me like almost proud of the industry as a whole, if that's possible. Just thinking about all the people and all the decades that have gone into figuring out how to do this, and obviously those people today who are still maintaining it. It's just unbelievably tidy. And I'm not sure if I explained it right, but here it is one more time. It's not that the system is creating extra steam for the kiln here. It's the same steam. They're burning the bark and sawdust to boil water. The boiling water creates steam. The steam gets moved over to heat the kiln, and then it leaves the kiln, and on its way out, it runs by a turbine to generate electricity, and then the water condenses back down from steam into water and is recycled again. How about that?
The industry's been sawmilling for a long time, and so there's a lot of years of technological advances and if you're manufacturing and you're making residuals every day, like it's a problem. You've got to figure out something to do with it. It used to be they just burned everything. They didn't generate electricity
They
from
put
it.
it in a pile and burn it up.
What's called the wigwam burner, like looks like a wigwam, and they just burned it.
Now we're really going into the mill here, and the first step for the logs is debarking and bucking. They load the logs with the small end first, and then they hit a cutoff saw, which is a circular saw, and it's cutting the logs into multiples of either 8, 9, or 10. From now on, the logs are referred to as blocks, and before they hit the next saw, they go through this little hole where they get scanned and measured by a bunch of lasers.
We do our first initial 2 cuts. If you look under this screen right here, this is the predicted cut based on the scan. So it's predicting the cuts that are going to be made. So 2x4x9, 2x6x9. So it can predict the wane in the lumber based on that curvature. So it knows that these pieces will more likely be economy. These will be number 2s. All of the cuts are based on the optimization from the scanner.
It's just the computer figures out what's the most efficient way.
Right, and it's looking at these, how it's going to be broken down. And it knows the downstream sequence of the resaw, the edgers. It knows those are programmed back into it as well.
This part of the mill was my favorite by far. First, you come down this little flight of stairs, and all of a sudden, you're on a wood floor. And maybe you have to be there to understand, but it really gave it a neat feeling. It just felt proper somehow. Plus, The wood is kind of all moving around this area in a semicircle. Here are the two big band saws that are breaking down the blocks. Everywhere you look, there's motors and hydraulics and chains and belts. It's just so impressive. Now the piece is referred to as a cant, and they get scanned again before running through the final saw and getting cut into the actual boards. And I couldn't get the camera up tight on the actual saw. It was kind of deep inside of a shroud, but it's called an edger, and it's actually several smaller circular saws kind of all in a row that move and adjust to hit the cant at all the right spots according to what the computer predetermined. Well, here's our boards now, and they're going up this conveyor. They get scanned, and then they get sorted and dropped into bins with other of the same matching product.
This is called the stacker, and this is stacking the unit, preparing it for the dry kilns, and in between each layer is the sticker. The sticker allows the steam to travel through the unit evenly, dry it uniformly.
This lumber right here is rough lumber that's been sawn but not planed and not dried. So it's come through the sawmill. It's on these little railroad tracks, no eased edge or anything. And this isn't trimmed flush yet. And the exterior is not planed yet, and it's still 100% wet. So it's oversized to accommodate the planing and the drying.
Well, we got really lucky, and the kiln happened to be open right when we were walking by, so we got to peek inside. These are the pipes that move the steam through and create the heat. And if you remember back, this steam is generated by burning the sawdust and bark from the mill.
How hot does it get and how long does it stay in here?
So it depends on the time of the year, but between 8 to 40 hours and about 180 to 200 degrees around there.
This is the planer, and you can see the boards just launching out of it so rapidly. They hit this conveyor where they get inspected and graded. Any boards with defects are marked and set aside, but big picture, you can see we got 2x4s now, and they are ready to package and ship. Huge thanks to John and everyone at Douglas County Forest Products for letting us come through the mill. If you want to see these products put to work, I'm filming the contractors who are building our house. They are using these exact studs from this mill. So take a look at that if you want to see these things put to good use. Thanks for watching, everyone. Keep up the good work. We'll catch you next time.
So like this is the tag that you would have had on yours. So white fir 2x4, 92 and 5/8, that's the length. Number 2, 294 pieces. So this is the board feet. So if you were to take the board footage divided by the number of pieces, you get your board foot per board. And that's how many 1 inch by 1 inch by 12 inch board feet are in this package.